Now, following growing pressure, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has finally addressed the public, saying he should have been clearer when he promised in May that women involved in the CervicalCheck cancer screening scandal wouldn't have to go to court. Vicky Phelan, one of the original women who was affected by the scandal, has said the Taoiseach must make good on his commitment. Otherwise, he should not be in the position that he's in. Well, joining me with that story and everything else this morning are Gerry O'Regan from the Irish Independent and Ellen Gunning, Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations. Good morning to you both. Ellen, let's just start off by clarifying exactly what the Taoiseach did say when he spoke about how the women affected by the CervicalCheck scandal would be dealt with by the government and by the courts system and by the possibility of mediation. What exactly did he promise?
Back in May, he was very clear. I'm not clear why he's clarifying now, because he was very clear in May. What he said in May, and I'm paraphrasing him, was that no woman would have to go into court. That in effect what the government would do was no woman had contracted with the labs, so the government would actually set up a mediation system. The government would mediate with the women, or the State Claims Agency would mediate with the women, and afterwards the government would pursue the labs. He was very clear about it. No woman should have to face a court battle to get any kind of compensation. Now, yesterday he said that he wanted to clarify what he had said.
And we should just be clear that when he made those comments back in May, he was questioned about what would happen if the US laboratories contested these cases in any way. That specific question was put to him, and he said, we will deal with them as the government, the women won't have to.
He said the government may be exposed, but we will deal with it. Exactly that this is not an issue that women should worry about. This is something we'll take on board. Then yesterday he said he needed to clarify, and he comes out with this statement about he should have really made it clear that people are entitled to go to court. I mean, a 2-year-old idiot knows that people are entitled to go to court. These women don't want to go to court. Anybody who looked at Ruth Morrissey going in and out of court last week was horrified. I mean, you cannot justify it. It's legally wrong, it's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong, it's medically wrong, it's wrong, it's plain wrong. The Taoiseach understood that in May. He knew it was wrong, and he said he didn't want any woman to go into court. He now needs to remember how wrong it is and simply stop it. He needs to tell the State Claims Agency to fix this, to make an arrangement, to pay women, and then let the legal people fight it out.
But I mean, I think the biggest problem here, to be honest, Ellen and Gerry, is what he said, and that he shouldn't have made the promises. He should never have promised something that really couldn't be kept, a promise that he couldn't keep. Because at the end of the day, no matter what the legal situation was going to be, there are always going to be questions over whether cases are black and white, whether who's responsible, who's culpable, whether or not there was negligence on the part of the US laboratory. That was always going to have to be played out, probably in court, to be honest, Gerry. He shouldn't have made that promise.
Well, he shouldn't, but perhaps it's understandable in a way that he did. I mean, this is
understandable if your government is coming under huge pressure and you're trying to deal with this raging flame and douse it.
Well, you see, I think one of the things as well that hasn't really emerged in all this is, what did he mean by mediation? Anywhere you have mediation, you have the rights of both parties not to agree. I mean, it's often tried in industrial relations. So, for example, when he was offering mediation to the women involved, there was no guarantee that necessarily the women would agree with the result.
No, absolutely. And I think that was always quite clear, Gerry, to be honest, that if you weren't happy with the settlement that was being offered, you could pursue it through the courts. What he said was, you shouldn't have to go through the courts at all. But the issue now is that the laboratory, that they are saying, look, we weren't negligent in all of these cases, and the Taoiseach said, you won't have to worry about that because we'll pursue them.
Yes, but the big problem for him all the time was that there's a third party involved, which is the laboratories. And I don't know, I would say you're into a whole legal minefield here, that, for example, if the outcome of the mediation process is A, are the laboratories going to say, well, that then is going to affect us and our possible liability? There's also the risk down the line in all of this is that they have to, if you like, maintain these laboratories to be willing to carry out tests, medical tests, not just in this arena, but in various other medical spheres. And you have the whole area precedent. I mean, there's the other thing as well as I think he didn't take fully into account at the time is that there's millions and millions of euro at stake here. In other words, the number of women involved, I think, is much greater than was initially speculated. So
but was always going to be the problem here was the payouts and the settlements that were going to be made were going to be dependent on whether or not there was negligence proven on the part of the laboratories. Not just the fact that the women weren't told, but also that the laboratory was negligent, and we haven't established that.
Yeah, but the key word there is proven. And in other words, the people who are central to all of this are the laboratories. And the very fact that you have court hearings and the court process means that there's conflicting evidence and conflicting claims on both sides. And Leo Varadkar just put his toe in the water and has now found himself in a whirlpool. But I do think, in fairness to him, this is not as simple as it seems, unfortunately.
Yeah, but maybe he shouldn't have made it appear to be as simple as it seemed back in May. And I just question his motives behind that. He's a smart man, isn't he, Ellen?
No, I think there's two things. There's one thing is his comments, but the complexities of the cases remain.
I think I just want to come back to the question of liability, because there is a question of liability. Who was liable and when? Can we just focus on the women? They're not liable for anything. The government said it's a really good and a holy and a wholesome thing that you should have smear tests and prostate tests and breast cancer tests. And we, the people who elected the government, bought into that and said, great idea, we will do it. All of these women were very responsible. They looked after their health. They did what they were asked to do. And I think that's the focus. It's not who's liable. Nobody told them. That's the bottom line. And the government has accepted they should have been told. So let's compensate the women for not having been told. Let's give them the time remaining with their families without that terrible, terrible mental pressure of knowing that
it is harrowing to watch terminally ill women have to walk through the steps of the forecourts and go through the courts process, which is incredibly intimidating for most people.
And they have to discuss their pain, and they have to talk about how this diagnosis affects their family. This is cruel. It's just wrong by any measure.
Okay.
I think the government has to bite the bullet. We know, as a people, we accept that it's going to cost us an awful lot of money. It will cost us money. Put an end to this for the women and then let the lawyers sort it out afterwards.
OK, just moving on to one of the other stories that's going to be rumbling, I think, all summer long. August was looking quite quiet in the news, and now it's got a little bit more interesting.
No, Brian's novel was August is a wicked month.
It is indeed a wicked month. Look, for the pure theatre of it, I have to say, I'm enjoying the fact that there is going to be a presidential election and who are all these possible candidates and what's happening behind the scenes. The name mentioned yesterday, Eamon O'Keefe. Now, Eamon O'Keefe did make soundings, didn't he, earlier, that he would have been interested in running as the Fianna Fáil candidate if Fianna Fáil had decided to contest this election, which they didn't. But it appears that he might be trying to find another route to run, Gerry.
Yes. Well, I think the thing about Eamon O'Keefe is that he's not exactly an over-enthusiastic supporter of Micheál Martin and the current regime leading Fianna Fáil. I think he's clearly insinuated along the way that when it comes to being a potential leader of Fianna Fáil, he doesn't think his own prospects wouldn't be half bad, and he has his own vision for the future of Fianna Fáil and all that.
So he's not worried about breaking ranks here at all?
I don't. No, it's a big gamble for him, you know. I mean, but then again, anybody entering this presidential race, I mean, you know, seem to be... and it's taking a gamble to an extent, and it's slightly different from conventional politics, as we saw the last time when there was a run for the presidency.
Do you think that he has a chance of securing these 4 council nominations? Well, and what are the Fianna Fáil councillors going to do? What have they been instructed to do by the Fianna Fáil party? Can they support him?
I don't think so, because the official, if you like, there's a kind of party whip. In other words, the official stance of Fianna Fáil was that they were going to back the current incumbent, Michael D. So you can't have one of their own then sort of running for it and them sort of supporting him. And then again, if he doesn't do very... You know, the big thing for Fianna Fáil is they don't want to back somebody who's not going to do very well and suffer a trouncing. And how can they come out and, you know, support Eamon O'Keefe when at the same time they've said Michael D, in actual fact, is a very good president? It's going to be a very interesting month, and I think this presidential election is shaping up to be a whole lot of fun.
A whole lot of fun. Gavin Duffy heading down to Waterford today to address Waterford County Council, looking for their nomination. Are you impressed by him so far?
Didn't he play a blinder in the way that he announced it? I'm impressed with the tactics that he has displayed so far. It was rumoured in the Sunday Independent, and he had given an interview that he might do it. On Sunday morning, as the papers went to press, he tweets and says, yes, I have decided I will be doing it. It turns out on Monday evening, he commanded the news agenda. Are we seeing shades of Donald Trump here? I certainly am. Reality TV TV star, makes a run for it, announces by tweeting, and then says, and his second tweet, I think, said, and if you're interested in joining a campaign that's very different, join me. I think
Where have we
August is going
heard
to be
these
a
phrases
super
before?
hit.
My worry is that if he becomes president, our relationship with North Korea and Iran, if he's going to be Trump-like in his presidency, could change overnight.
Could we have
Does
Kim
that
Jong un of the Irish before we know it?
Is Rocket Man looking at the Irish presidential election with more than a degree of interest?
Just last question, Ellen, how do you think Michael D. Higgins is feeling about this? Because I was interested in what Gavin Duffy had to say yesterday in that short clip that I think we probably saw also on the news, where he said, look, I'm going to be answering questions about my background and my business interests. And so should Michael D. Higgins. It's time that he faced up to tough questions about what he's achieved over the last 7 years.
I think it would be a very, very interesting debate, because Michael D. Higgins in the last few days is actually changing his tactics. You can see that Michael D. Higgins has always adopted the attitude that the president may not comment on anything political.
And he's above this, perhaps,
and then
above
he sort
this
of
run.
worked his way around it and he commented politically anyway. And he's done that right throughout his presidency. I think it would be fascinating if Michael D. actually said, here is my record and I will stand on it, and I think we as a people deserve it. I think Gavin Duffy is coming in saying, Trump-like, here's what I might do. You've Pat Finucane's son rumoured to be running for Sinn Féin, and I don't know, Eamon O'Keefe, wasn't Sean Gallagher the non-Fianna Fáil candidate the last time? I think it's shaping up to be a wickedly wonderful presidential campaign.
I think as well people are going to find that Michael D. is a tough competitor. Michael D. is a very experienced politician.
He might
and
have been
he
as tested
reinvented
last time, but
himself
he
as
will
the
this time.
cuddly president. But at gut level, he's a fairly strong political street fighter. And he timed his own announcement for the presidency very well to try and wrong-foot any potential opponent.
Yeah, much cuter perhaps than he lets on sometimes.
I think so.
All right, we have to leave it there, folks, but I think we'll be discussing this again in the near future. Look at the glee, look at our sad glee. Plenty more to come on Ireland Day. I'm back after this short break.